Any questions? It's hard for me to see you back there in the back. I speak up, I'm hard of hearing and you're a long way.
I'd like to speak to them in a little bit more detail.
With the people in pregnant women?
Yes. Who's doing the research on what should be your staff? Can I speak to in detail about it?
Well, we will have there are two doctors, a PhD and an MD, that are actually in charge of the pre and post testing and in charge of the study, but we will, some of our people, including an MD on our staff here, will actually conduct the training, the one-on-one supervised training. So if you'll catch me in the hall when we get out, when we get through here, I can talk to you about it a little bit more. Any other questions back there? Yeah. I'm looking right into the lights. I can hardly see you.
The new type of leg training you were talking about, doing the 50 to 100 reps, how many days a week would you suggest doing that? Still 3 days a week?
I honestly don't know. That remains to be seen. But certainly no more than 3, and perhaps only twice.
And what would be done on the third day? A small amount of
well, if you find that twice a week is enough, then you probably wouldn't do anything for the legs on the third day. Any other questions?
The essential function of the new computerized machines, is it simply going to act as an idiot box to tell you when you're using it correctly, using correct force, or is it going to have some other function?
All right, in practice, here's what will happen. You will take a man up to, for example, that machine. He's never seen it before. You will sit down in the machine, thereby showing him what he's supposed to do. You will put your elbows on the pads in line with the axis of rotation of the machine, explaining to him as you do it what you're doing. You will take a hold of the 2 handles, one in each hand, and then you will point to the readout section, and you will then demonstrate what you want him to do. You will explain to him for him to put his elbows there, take a hold of the handles, and line the handles up so they're in line with one another. Each arm will then be in the mid-range of possible movement. Then, slowly, statically, produce force against those handles without permitting either one to move until you're inputting the maximum possible static force. Having done that, you will then slowly relax, and I emphasize slowly relax. It is more dangerous, I don't know why, but it is. I know it is. It's more dangerous, more likely to produce an injury if you suddenly release a force than it is if you suddenly apply one. So you should not ever move suddenly against a force. Don't apply it quickly. Don't release it suddenly. Apply it slowly and then gradually release it. Having done that, then extend the right arm, simultaneously flexing the left, and then extend the left arm, simultaneously flexing the right. Now you put your man in the machine, and he does, step by step, he does the same thing. You now know everything you need to know about that man. You know his strength in that position. You know his possible range of movement. And from his strength in this position, you know what his strength should be in every position. The machine will take note of this, and the next time that individual comes in, it will provide him with an appropriate level of resistance for his existing strength level. He will then train in the machine, following, more or less as a pilot follows a flight director. He will have a light arrangement which will tell him how fast to move, the range of movement, the number of repetitions, and the force that he is inputting. If he is putting in the proper amount of force, he'll get a flat light, a line of lights. If he puts in too much, it'll go above that. If he doesn't put in enough, it'll go below. So he will be told by the machine what to do, precisely. And a record will be made of what he has done. And all of the machines will work in the same fashion. Now, You might, for example, ask him to do, his strength might be, these figures are arbitrary, he might produce 100 pounds of force statically. Fine. Now you want to give him 50% of that. That's arbitrary. So you have plugged him in on a 50% program. Now you're going to ask him to do 10 repetitions, again arbitrary, at 50%. Well, the first repetition will be quite easy. You're only asking him to do half of what he can do. So that's very easy. The second repetition will also be easy, but not quite as easy. By the time he gets to about 9 repetitions, he will be doing his absolute maximum and failing. His force indication will have dropped down to maybe 40%. The lights will be telling him that he's not putting in enough. And of course, the computer will record that on the 9th repetition, he was no longer able to do 50. That's his point of failure. Subsequently, the next workout, he will again be asked to do the same amount by the machine. If during that workout he is able to do 10 repetitions, if that's the guide number, with the ask for 50%, then the machine will take note of that. The following workout, when he comes back, it will increase his resistance. It'll still be 50% of his one-time maximum, but it'll be a higher force level by about 4%. Well, then with a higher weight, he won't be able to do as many. He'll get maybe 8 repetitions with that. And gradually, he'll work up to where he can get 10. And the first time he's able to do 10, the machine will automatically increase it. And this will not only keep a record of what you've done, but it'll give you a printout showing precisely what you've done in every position. If your range of movement increases, you'll know that. If you increase your flexibility. If you lose flexibility, you'll know that. You will know how your strength is going up in every position. So workout by workout, you will have a precise record of your progress. Any other questions?
Recently I've read that sports like tennis, bicycling, racquetball have peaked out of their interest curve. Where do you see the interest curve for high-intensity weight training being at this point in time?
Well, our business has continued to grow. We are not growing this year as rapidly as we did last year or the year before, but we're still up. I think it'll continue to grow. I can't read the future any more than you can. I don't like a lot of things on the economic horizon, but I believe that weight training, strength training, health clubs, and similar applications will continue to grow if we don't have a total collapse. If we have a total collapse, we're all in the street with shotguns, so it doesn't matter. But assuming anything less than a total collapse, I think the thing will grow. I think it'll slow down for a while and then start back up again. I'm not particularly surprised by tennis, racquetball, handball peaking out. That is a very active activity, one that's very easy to get into and one very easy to lose enthusiasm for. Most people, but in my experience, in my opinion, just don't have the stick-to-itiveness in a program of that sort. Properly applied weight training, in some senses, is easier. And you get progressive, seeable, measurable results. You get immediate feedback. From tennis, from racquetball, you don't have that sort of meaningful feedback. So I'm not at all surprised that tennis and racquetball and handball have more or less peaked out. I anticipated that. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, what about your new book that's coming out about Nautilus for bodybuilders?
I'm sorry?
Your new book that's coming out?
My new book? I don't know anything about it. That's Al Darden's book. You'll have to ask him. Don't hold me responsible. What?
I think we talked about that yesterday. It'll be outside 2 weeks.
I'll know about it when I read it. Don't tell me you're associating with bodybuilders now, Al. Any other questions? Well, I guess that pretty well covers it. So, in general, we're working on research in a number of areas, and as we get the information, it'll become known to you. But several of these things will be very significant. All right, thank you.
Langer, and I'm pleased to have in the studio Mr. Arthur Jones. Arthur Jones is president of Nautilus Sports Medical Industries and creator of the Nautilus equipment. Welcome to the Medicine Man, Arthur.
Glad to be here, Steve.
We hear terms and we see terms in the media, isometric exercise, isokinetic exercise. They seem to be used interchangeably. My question to you is, what is isokinetic? What is isometric exercise, and are they the same?
No, they're not the same. Both the terms, isometric and isokinetic, like all terms, are invented phrases or names intended to give a certain impression. Iso is a Latin term which simply means same. Metric refers to the length. In this instance, the length of the muscle. So isometric exercise implies, or is intended to imply, an exercise in a static position, an exercise in which movement does not occur, where you are straining immovably against an unmovable object. So the name comes from the fact, isometric, same length, that the length of the muscle remains constant during the exercise. Back in the 50s, a great deal was stated in favor of isometric exercise, particularly by a group of people in Germany. The credibility of the particular people was such that the claims initially made for isometric exercise were accepted at face value. But a few years went by, people in this country experimented with isometric exercise and were not capable of producing benefits comparable to the claims made by the people in Germany. Eventually, somebody went back and questioned the people who originally came up with isometric exercise and said, "We have not been able to duplicate your results." The Germans redid their research, came back with a bit of egg on their face, and admitted that, well, neither can we. We overstated the benefits of isometric exercise. So isometric simply means pushing against an immovable object, exercise without movement. More recently, the term isokinetic. Now again, iso is Latin. It simply means same. In this instance, the second part of the word, kinetic, comes from kinetic energy. That means movement or speed of movement, the implication being constant velocity. In other words, movement with a constant speed of movement. In fact, then, isometric and isokinetic have very little in common, except they're both modalities or methodologies of exercise. Isometric is still, stationary, non-moving. Isokinetic is, in theory, movement at a constant speed. Well, to begin with, great claims were made for isometrics. Subsequently, it was proven that they could not live up to these claims. More recently, even more fantastic claims have been made for isokinetic exercise. Nor can these people live up to their claims. If I were going to design a poor methodology of exercise, then I think my first choice would be isokinetics.
We'll be right back with Mr. Arthur Jones. Welcome back. We're talking with my guest, Mr. Arthur Jones, creator of the Nautilus equipment, and our topic is isokinetic exercise.
I commented earlier, Steve, that if I were looking for a poor, a non-productive, or for that matter, a dangerous form of exercise, in essence, a very bad form of exercise, and I probably would quit looking if I stumbled onto isokinetics. So in spite of all the claims made for an isokinetic exercise, none of which claims can be proven, in fact, none of which claims can be supported, isokinetics is a very poor way to train, for the very simple reason that isokinetic exercise eliminates the negative or eccentric part of work. The scientific community seems to prefer the terminology concentric and eccentric. I don't like the terms for two reasons. They're too close. Concentric, eccentric in speech or in writing are too close, they're too similar. They lead to confusion. People have to stop and think. They get the opposite impression. Therefore, they frequently get the opposite impression. Therefore, I prefer the terms negative and positive.
Arthur, I've seen articles in various medical media and various exercise media saying negative exercise is worthless exercise, and the only thing that's of value is positive exercise.
You have seen those articles written by people who are in the employ of companies that are producing an isokinetic brand of exercise. What would you expect them to say? If you go to Ford, do you expect them to praise Chevrolet? If you go to General Motors, do you expect them to praise Ford or Lincoln or Mercury? These people are doing research, they're being paid, they are employees of a particular company. So they're going to praise the house. They're going to maintain that what their product or their methodology is better. But making claims, Steve, is one thing. Being able to back up those claims is something else. Let's look at the simple logic of it. In the first place, let's define our terms.
Please.
If you lift an object, if you curl a barbell, if you lift a rock, your muscles are contracting. They're becoming shorter. That is positive or concentric work. Having gotten it to the top, if you now lower it back down, that is eccentric or negative work. Now, the nature of isokinetic exercise devices is such that they have eliminated the negative part of the work. Their resistance in one form or another is based on friction. And friction, by its very nature, has no back pressure of negative work. They don't have negative work in their exercise. Therefore, it's evil. I'm reminded of the first so-called improvement in the shape of the square wheel. They went from a square wheel to a triangular wheel. And then they tried to rationalize this as an improvement in the shape of the wheel on the basis that it provided one less bump per revolution, only 3 bumps instead of 4. Well, of course, there's only one meaningful shape for a wheel, and that's perfectly round, which means an infinite number of sides, and therefore no bumps. But here you have an idiot who doesn't understand the wheel. He starts with a square wheel, and he's going to improve it, so he goes to a triangular wheel. Then he tries to rationalize this because he's got one less bump per revolution. Well, somewhat along the same lines, the people that are marketing, that are promoting, that are touting isokinetic forms of exercise are trying to rationalize the removal of the most important part of exercise. If you remove the negative work from exercise, there is no stretching because there is no back pressure of negative work to provide stretching. As a consequence, there will be no benefit whatsoever to your flexibility.
It sounds to me, though, from just your definition of negative work, that negative, like using the curl as an example, letting the barbell down, and work is a contradiction in terms.
No, it's not a contradiction in terms. If you raise a barbell and then simply let it drop, then you're doing no work. But if you lower it down under control, you have to perform work in order to do that.
I see.
Part of the confusion results from the fact that they try to take physical definitions of work as applied to a machine and apply that to a human being. For example, The definition of work and the definition of power as normally applied to a machine are not applicable to a human being. What if you stand with a barbell in your hands at the mid-range of possible movement, with your forearms parallel to the floor, supporting that weight? There is no movement, either up or down, therefore no work is being performed. Now, since power, by definition, is the rate of work, well, if you're performing zero work, then there's zero power. So you're neither performing work nor are you producing power. Well, now, if that's true, why can't you stand there and hold it forever? Why does your face turn red? Why does your blood pressure elevate? Why do your muscles become tired? Why do you perspire? Why does your metabolic rate increase? And why can't you stand there forever? Since, according to the definition of work and according to the general definition of the accepted definition of power, as applied to a machine, you are neither working nor are you producing power. Well, then you're doing nothing. Well, metabolically you are working, because in order to support that weight, you are producing force. Therefore, your muscles are working, regardless of the fact that they are not moving. Therefore, if you raise a weight or if you lower a weight, metabolically you are working. Your muscles are producing force.
I had something happen to me last summer. I was at Yosemite Park climbing one of these steep mountains, and I had no trouble at all going up to the top. But I found, and I didn't realize, and it probably has bearing on the essay that I read that you wrote about negative work, coming down the mountain, when I walked down, my legs went into spasm, the muscles went into spasm. I could not...
Because you're working. In 1936, my brother and I visited the centennial of... No, I'm sorry, that was 1933 in Chicago. In 1936, we visited the Texas Centennial in Dallas. And we walked down from the top of the tallest building, which I think was about 39 stories. The next day, we were cripplingly sore. 30 or 40 years later, I realized that had we walked up, we would have been tireder, but we would not have become as sore. That's one of the differences in negative and positive work.
But I had already walked up, but coming down, I just couldn't do it. I had to stop.
Did you get sore?
Very sore, muscle spasm, the whole business.
That was a result of the negative work.
We'll be right back with my guest, Mr. Arthur Jones, creator of the Nautilus equipment. We're talking with Arthur Jones, creator of the Nautilus equipment. Arthur, can we expect to get sore every time we do negative work? Two-part question. And number two, is getting sore necessarily bad?
Getting sore is unpleasant. And it seems to be well established that the negative part of work will initially, now note that word initially, cause more muscular soreness than an equal amount or an equal magnitude of positive work. But muscular soreness does not recur in an individual that is training on a regular basis. For example, if I take you into a gymnasium and you've never trained in your life, and I put you through a normal workout with barbells, for example, both lifting and lowering, doing positive and negative work, then you can expect to become, if you work hard the first time. Now, mind you, this is the first time you ever trained in your life. You can expect to become very sore. Let's call that magnitude of soreness a 50 on a scale of 0 to 100. So the next day you will have maybe a level of soreness of 30. 2 days later, you'll have a level of soreness of 40. 3 days later, you'll have a level of soreness of 50. So you will become somewhat sore 24 hours after your first workout. Markedly sore 48 hours afterwards. Markedly sorer than that another 24 hours later. And then, having reached a peak of 50, it will start to decline. 3 or 4 days later, it'll be back to 0, assuming you continue to train. Now, that's the pattern with normal work, which is both negative and positive. If instead you had done a negative-only workout, then instead of being sore at a level of 30 24 hours later, you might have been sore at a level of 50 24 hours later, which is the peak that you reached previously after 72 hours. So you have gone higher faster. Then 48 hours after the first workout, 2 days later, you might reach a peak of 60 or 65.
Can we assume from what...
But while the soreness will be greater and while it will come quicker, it will decline more rapidly. So that instead of staying sore for a week, you will probably be entirely over the soreness in about 4 days, assuming again that you continue to train. Then you can forget the soreness. It will never come back as long as you continue to train on a somewhat regular basis. So being sore from an exercise is normally a one-time phenomena. It can be avoided. It's not necessary to become sore at all. If you go into the gym on the occasion of your first workout and do a medium workout, that will produce little or no soreness. If you go back on the second workout and do a little bit more, that will produce little or nothing in the way of soreness. And if you spend 2 weeks gradually working into the program, then you will never experience muscular soreness. But if you just jump in hard and heavy the first time, then you will become sore. But it's not something that repeats itself. You're not going to continue to get sore every time you work out. No matter what you did after the first 3 or 4 weeks of steady training, you will not produce any degree of muscular soreness. It does not come back.
Is it possible to do a negative-only workout in a gymnasium?
Well, you can do a certain limited number of exercises. For example, we had we did an experiment at the military academy at West Point in 1975. The Bengals, a professional football team from Cincinnati, had hired a football player. They'd signed him up to a contract. They'd given him an $80,000 bonus. The man weighed 286 pounds, and one of his tests in order to be accepted was he had to chin himself a certain number of times. You know, do a pull-up on a bar. This man couldn't begin to chin himself. 12 days prior to his reporting for the training camp, they sent him to us in desperation and said, make this man capable of chinning himself. Otherwise, we're going to blow our 80,000. We've given him the 80,000. He spent it. It's gone. If he can't chin himself, we're going to have to drop him. So do something, please. You got 12 days to do it. Well, you know, we take him to a chinning bar. He reaches up. He grabs a hold of the bar. He tries to pull, and nothing happens. So what do? Well, you can't train him in a positive manner. He's incapable of pulling himself up. So we put him on a bench in the top position. And then we removed the bench and told him to lower himself. The first time we did it, he went zap to the floor. He just about yanked his arms out by the roots. He couldn't even do a negative chin. He couldn't lower himself. So we held him up. We stood under him, held him by the buttocks, and gave him assistance so that he could do part of the negative work. 12 days later, he was tested. He did 4 3/4 chins in a normal fashion, pulling himself up and lowering himself down, pulling himself back up. He didn't quite get 5, but that was more than enough to pass his test. Those kind of results can be produced with negative exercise. They cannot be produced in any other fashion. The negative part of work, Steve, is by far the most productive and the most important part of exercise. And when you leave the negative work out of exercise, you have little or nothing of benefit left.
We'll be right back with Arthur Jones after these messages. Welcome back. Our guest is Arthur Jones. Arthur, how can a person who is interested in incorporating more negative work into their training program go about doing it?
There are a certain number of exercises that you can do in a negative fashion without help. Unfortunately, doing pure negative work is not practical for all exercises. You can do chins, for example, by climbing up a stand on a chair to get into the top position, and then lower yourself down. Most women can't chin themselves, but most women can do a negative chin by simply climbing up onto a chair or a footstool into the top position, then taking their feet off of the stool or the chair and slowly lowering themselves down. By training in that fashion, within a few weeks, they will increase their strength so much that they can do chins in a normal fashion. And a few other exercises like that. But where possible, don't try to avoid the negative part of work. In fact, emphasize the negative part of work. Accentuate the negative part, because the negative part of exercise, quite contrary to the claims of the promoters, the touters of isokinetic exercise, the negative part of exercise is by far the most important part of exercise.
My thanks to you, Arthur Jones, for being a guest on The Medicine Man. My thanks to everyone for watching the show. Any more information about any of the things we've discussed today, kindly write to us at P.O. Box 132, Moraga, California 94556. Good health.